Okay, so I'm going to first go through the agenda for today's presentation. I'm going to kick it off with some introductory comments about why bringing families home is an important program. Then I'm going to turn the presentation over to our partners in San Francisco to talk about bringing families home. Then my colleague Emily Rhodes, a Chapin Hall researcher, will talk about the findings from our evaluation. And finally, I'll offer some concluding remarks. So, family homelessness is a significant but often hidden problem in the United States. Most estimates of family homelessness are based on counts of families staying in emergency shelters, and those estimates don't include families living doubled up, families staying in domestic violence shelters, or unsheltered families. For nearly 3 decades, researchers have been studying the relationship between family homelessness and child welfare system involvement. This research has consistently found that families experiencing homelessness are more likely to be the focus of a Child Protective Services investigation and to have a child placed in out-of-home care compared to low-income but stably housed families. And this relationship persists even after accounting for other factors associated with child welfare system involvement. Studies have also shown that unstable or inadequate housing can delay reunification among families with children in out-of-home care, even if housing problems were not what brought the family to the attention of Child Protective Services. Next slide, please. Several factors may contribute to the high rate of child welfare system involvement among families experiencing homelessness. In some cases, families come to the attention of CPS because their homelessness poses a risk to the health and safety of their children. In other cases, homelessness plays more of an indirect role. For example, homelessness can increase parental stress, exacerbate mental health or substance use problems, and compromise parents' ability to adequately care for their children. Additionally, families staying in shelters are under a high degree of surveillance by staff, all of whom are mandated reporters. Consequently, parenting behaviors that would otherwise go unobserved may be reported if there is even the slightest suspicion that they constitute maltreatment. This is sometimes referred to as the fishbowl effect. Next slide. A growing body of evidence suggests that addressing the housing needs of child welfare system-involved families experiencing homelessness can result in improved child welfare outcomes. Yet, housing is generally not considered a child welfare intervention, and child welfare agencies often lack funding to pay for housing for families. Moreover, many child welfare system-involved families experiencing homelessness face a constellation of problems, including mental health or substance use disorders or domestic violence. And these high-need families may require additional supports beyond housing alone. Next slide. A promising approach for these families is supportive housing. Supportive housing is a housing-first approach that pairs housing with case management and other supportive services. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Vlada Gulchin from San Francisco Human Services Agency and Randall Jackson from Homeless Prenatal Program, who are going to talk about bringing families home.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you everybody for having us today. So what is Bringing Families Home program, or as we often call it, BFH? The program was created and established in 2016 by an Assembly Bill 1603 and launched in July of 2017 in California. The goal for BFH is to help families involved in child welfare system with housing and intense case management. Participating in this program aims to increase the reunification rates and prevent foster care placements. In 2012, the Children's Bureau funded 5 sites in the whole United States to test permanent housing with supportive services for child welfare families. San Francisco was one of the sites, and the original model that preceded BFH started in 2014 and was called Families Moving Forward, or as often we used to call it, FMF. It was funded through a federal demonstration grant. The program focus was to help some of the highest need families in San Francisco child welfare system with housing along with supportive services. Bringing Families Home program was launched in July of 2017, and it is a state-funded initiative designed to also provide housing-related assistance to child welfare-involved families, as well as intense case management for these families. It has been a very successful and important service that we can offer to our families. Next slide, please. We created a collaborative partnership between Human Services Agency, Family and Children Services, Homeless Prenatal Program, and Chapin Hall. Families' journey to Bringing Families Home program starts with their involvement in child welfare services. Family and Children Services has a contract with the Homeless Prenatal Program to coordinate housing search, housing find, and supportive services for child welfare families. Chapin Hall works closely with HSA FCS and HPP to monitor the implementation of BFH and evaluate housing, well-being, and child welfare outcomes. In the following presentation, we will dive deeper into this journey. Next slide, please. So who do we serve in the Bringing Families Home project? All families that are reported to San Francisco Child Welfare get triaged for homelessness. For many families, the lack of housing becomes an underlying reason to be involved with us. During the child welfare investigation, if the allegations of neglect or abuse are substantiated, the referral becomes a case with child welfare. For the referrals for BFH program, families must be receiving either FM or FR services. For anyone who is not familiar with the San Francisco Child Welfare Services, FM stands for Family Maintenance Services, where children have not been removed. However, parents need to complete various services in order for children to stay in place with their parents or guardians. FR stands for the Family Reunification, where children are removed and the family works towards reunifying with their children. Next slide, please. The BFH program was designed to treat families at the highest risk for removal and placement and serve them early in their child welfare service trajectory. The benefit of the BFH housing and intense case management interventions, connection with current providers, and coordination of services prevents deeper child welfare involvement. Our workers use a structured decision-making model, or as we often call it, SDM, to identify risk assessments and qualifying factors for the BFH program. And the qualifying factors you can see on the screen are child physical or developmental disability, medically fragile children, caregiver child mental health problems, caregiver criminal arrest history, or substance use program, as well as domestic violence. Now, Randall will go over the details of how HPP works with BFH clients referred by the Family and Children Services.
Thank you, Vlada. So wanted to go over just some of the key components in this program that I think has made it successful. And so initially, we typically do a town hall. It's a space that we create to have in-depth conversations with HPP and the protective service worker, supporting the family within their child welfare case. It's also an opportunity for us to do a bit of pre-screening, but primarily to really find out how the family has been doing within their case plan, areas in which the protective worker feels as though we may need to lean into and provide additional support. And so that's pretty much what that space is created for. And then the biggest component, I think, is also matching families to case management and housing specialists. And so we really pride ourselves on keeping the case management and housing piece separate. And so families are provided with two separate individuals to support with this process. Matching the family to a case manager is major, because we also want to make sure that we align the family with the case manager that is really skilled within their needs. And so within our intensive case management model and our housing first approach, we are able to really support families throughout their case plan and also within their housing stability plan. And so in all, just really being able to provide the family with a clear exit plan as they exit from our program, or should I say graduate, because this is a really big milestone for them. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we really prioritize having case management be with our case managers and the housing piece be with our housing specialists. Currently, right now, I have a team of 6 case managers, 2 housing specialists. We also have a client care coordinator along with an assistant manager. And so we are a pretty tight-knit team. And so some of the things that case managers are covering are assessments. So that's going to be our protective factors. Also our adults' need and strengths assessment to really be able to do a clear client journey and construct a housing stability plan that works best for the family. Housing specialists' main focus is going to be not only educating the family about the housing process, but also teaching families about how to be great tenants as well, and also their tenant rights. And so we also support with everything in regards to the move-in process, move out, the lease up. And then this middle section is just kind of where a lot of our work overlaps. So budgeting is going to be a big one, not only for housing specialists, but also throughout the case management. Connecting families to financial literacy is going to be key for stability. And housing search. Our work doesn't stop once we house a family. We also have to think about transitioning these families into a more affordable unit. And so that's going to be a group effort. And then also utilities and then the maintenance of the unit. We want to make sure that families have those living skills to really be sustainable throughout this program. And then now I will go ahead and transition it back to Vlauda to just talk about how our recent transition to rapid rehousing.
So when BFH was first established in San Francisco County, we had a number of housing choice vouchers that were issued to us by HUD, Housing and Urban Development. Our original housing model with BFH was called the permanent supportive housing. Most of our work for BFH permanent supportive housing involved coordinating housing for families getting housing choice vouchers, and then getting them into the intense case management with HPP. When the allocated number of housing choice vouchers for San Francisco County was exhausted and we did not receive additional vouchers from HUD, we had to shift on how to house families involved in child welfare. In July of 2022, we decided to add a rapid rehousing subsidy program, or as we often call it, RRH, as a housing solution to supplement the lack of housing choice vouchers. Next slide, please. So what is the difference between the original model with the permanent supportive housing, where we utilize housing choice vouchers, and our current model, where we utilize the rapid rehousing path? With the original model, we had an ongoing referral wait list, whereas with the rapid rehousing, we administer lottery once or twice a year. With the original model, we would enroll 50 to 70 families per year with the permanent supportive housing, whereas with the rapid rehousing, we enroll about 15 to 25 families per year with the subsidized housing. The housing choice vouchers were permanent from San Francisco Housing Authority, whereas with the rapid rehousing, which is a significant difference, it is a temporary rental subsidy for market rate rent administered by HPP. The focus with the permanent support housing was on family preservation, reunification, and successful child welfare case closure. The focus with the rapid rehousing is the same, our family preservation, reunification, and successful child welfare case closure. However, on top of it, we have to also think of an increased income to sustain stable housing when subsidy ends. Rapid rehousing subsidies are so expensive. We must pay every month for rent. With housing choice vouchers, the rent was covered by HUD, and this is how vouchers work. We were able to allocate more funds towards services versus covering rent. Randall will go into more specifics on housing in Bay Area, but as you can assume, it is quite pricey. Next slide for Randall, please.
Thank you, Vlada. So with the transition of our program, it also changed our timeline as far as our housing stability plans for our families. And so this is just a comparison, a breakdown of months on where our focus is within the first 6, where we are at the 1-year mark, and where we are entering in the 2nd year. And so as you can see, within our first 6 months for permanent supportive housing, we're really trying to improve the family function and really focus on the recovery and wellness. In comparison to the rapid rehousing, we're immediately connecting families to income and financial coaching. And so the question raises, well, what's the big difference? Well, with the permanent supportive housing, it really allows the family to dive in to the reason why the child welfare case may have been open, how we can really support with the recovery and the wellness, not only of head of household, but the entire family. This voucher base really allows the family to focus less on immediately increasing income versus with the rapid rehousing, because there is a timeline. We're expecting our families to really try to hit the ground running. And so income is going to be key with the rapid rehousing as we transition families off of subsidy and into low income housing. And so just those 2 pieces right there really gives you an insight on how we really want to prioritize permanent supportive housing for our families, because we can see long-term, really long-term stability as far as the recovery piece, and really, wanting families to feel as though they're able to balance all these things as they are coming together as one again, which can be challenging. And so resolution of the child welfare case is going to be our next focus within the following as we enter into year 1. We always want to make sure that families are feeling as though they're supported and provided with wraparound services, and really have the tools needed in order to resolve this child welfare case and never receive another. With rapid rehousing, again, we're still focusing on increasing the income, resolution of the child welfare case in tandem. And so a lot of times we're seeing that as a challenge for families to balance all the things that are expected of them within their case plan, along with now jumping into the workforce. Next slide, please. And with the transition, of course, there are challenges. And so the biggest one, lack of affordable housing in the Bay Area, is really a big one for our families, especially our families of larger sizes. And so a lot of times we're seeing families really having to downsize into smaller units. And so families also lack insufficient income to sustain housing within the Bay Area, or just, when the subsidy ends is really a struggle for our families sometimes. As you know, the median for average San Francisco is 6 figures or more. Families need to stay in compliance for the entire 2 years. It can be a struggle. With our intensive case management model, families having weekly home visits, weekly case management, monthly home visits, all these things tie into the compliance piece. And so sometimes that can be a struggle. A lot of times we see families, they have resolved their child welfare case and they're at a space where they kind of want to be able to just get into really being a family again. And so really want to kind of have those extra entities not be so present, if that makes sense. And then relocating our large families into low income or affordable housing, as I mentioned, is scarce in the Bay Area, especially for families 5, 6, individuals or more, especially for our single moms and our single dads. Next slide, please. And so this, we are looking at roughly our payment standard for San Francisco. And I would just love to just take a moment of silence as we really, really just take a look at these numbers with the expectation that families can really be able to house themselves without the additional support. And so we utilize private market to house a lot of our families. And so we've built relationships with property managements and or landlords to really support our families as we are up against families who may have little to no credit, limited income. A lot of times we have families who are chronically homeless, and so this is their first home. And so it could be a challenge for sure. And with the affordable housing piece, a lot of times we're looking at below market rate. San Francisco has designated that all brand new high rises, at least 25 to 30% of those are designated to low income housing. And so really want to connect families with those opportunities. But as you know, there's wait lists. And so we are starting this process early. Next slide, please. And so with our work and partnership with HSA and our protective workers, we have been able to really work with some amazing people. And so they have provided quotes here just to outline the work that we do together and how we have supported their family. The majority, if not all, of my families who have been selected to participate in BFH have successfully reunified with their children. The housing crisis is a major issue impacting so many families. So I am grateful for all the work that BFH does to ensure that our families receive the support needed to address this basic need. BFH, let me move my thing. There we go. That's better. BFH has helped several of my families find secure, safe, and stable housing that has allowed them to not only have successful reunification, but also the opportunity to create a new beginning for themselves and their children. The housing support from BFH allowed the family to focus on their services without obstacles of having to worry about housing. And so now we'd like to present a short video hearing from a couple of our families and some of the staff on the Bringing Families Home program.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Sanders. I'm 27 years old. I'm currently in the Bringing Families Home program. I've currently been in there for 2 years. They've helped me with a 2-bedroom in the downtown San Francisco area. I appreciate them so much for helping me out when I was at my lowest. My case manager, Camila Cunningham, has helped me so much, just giving me advice with housing and making sure I pay my rent on time.
Hi, my name is Tracy Cook. I'm the lead housing specialist here at the Homeless Prenatal Program. As a housing specialist, I work with families that are part of our housing programs with their housing search. At the beginning, we work with them on searching for units that fit their needs, as well as contacting the properties and setting up viewings. We then accompany to the family on viewings and then support them in completing and paying for rental applications. Once a family is housed, we support them with their security deposit and then get them all set up with beds, furniture, and home goods. Once a family is housed, we continue to support them as a housing specialist. We're there to advocate for their needs and help them learn to advocate for their own. We educate them around their rights as a tenant, and then we are also there to support them with any maintenance issues or concerns that come up.
In this program, we not only house people, but we do intensive case management, which includes setting goals with them, living skills, stability, and really the goal is just to create long-term sustainability because we never want to see them in this situation again. When I came to this agency, I really just came to inspire and positively impact families, and what we've been able to do in this program literally just far exceeds any goal I ever had. I absolutely love working with my team. I love working with the people in this agency, and most important, our clients.
Thank you. And now I'll pass it along to Emily to discuss our findings.
Okay, thank you, Randall. So I'm going to provide an overview of the evaluation. I can't cover everything in the webinar, so I'd encourage you to also visit our website for the full report if you want to spend some more time with the results. Okay, so an overview of our research approach. We use a few different data sources. We have administrative data on child welfare and services. We also conducted interviews with parents and surveys with parents. For implementation, we looked at the characteristics of the families served, the types of services they received, and we also learned about their experiences through surveys and interviews. We measured outcomes in several key domains, including housing stability, which included the number of families housed and how quickly they were housed. For child welfare, we looked at reunification outcomes and how quickly families reunified if they were placed out of home. For families with in-home cases, we measured whether or not placement was prevented. And we also looked at caregiver well-being using assessment results. Okay, so some of the family characteristics. This evaluation covers the 195 families that engaged in BFH between July 2017 and June 2023. So most of these families were in the permanent supportive housing program since that rapid rehousing program just began in 2022. So we are still evaluating both programs, but most of the results so far have to do with the permanent supportive housing families. This is the homelessness type when families were referred to BFH. So the most common homelessness types were being doubled up in a crowded living situation with family or friends, or living in inpatient treatment, which is more common with reunification cases. Fewer of the families were unsheltered, and this is typical for family homelessness. Okay, so a little less than half of the cases, the families had reunification cases where their children were placed out of home when they engaged in the program, and a little more than half had an in-home maintenance case. The majority of children were aged 5 and younger. You can see there were some infants, and then the most common age was 1 to 5. But there were also some teenagers and children aged 6 to 12. We have the caregiver's race or ethnicity for those caregivers that completed assessments. The most common race was Black, about 29% of caregivers, followed by Latino with 21%. You can see that several racial groups are represented in the BFH program. Okay, so housing outcomes. This shows the number of families housed by state fiscal year. BFH typically houses 20 to 30 families a year. State fiscal year 2024 is only based on 3 years of data so far, so we expect to see more families housed by the end of the year. About 90% of the families so far have been housed with a permanent voucher. You can see that more families in that light blue color have been housed with a subsidy after that rapid rehousing program began in fiscal year 23. Most of the families, 88%, are housed in San Francisco. This is quite an accomplishment given what Randall said about the challenging housing market in San Francisco. HPP spends a lot of time working with landlords to find families housing, and staying in San Francisco means that they are closer to HPP and other service providers. This shows the month in the program that families were housed. Families are typically housed within 4 months of joining BFH, although it takes some of the families longer. As you can see, the rapid rehousing families are typically housed a little faster, in part because they don't need to complete a voucher application. So, child welfare outcomes. So I can't cover all of the child welfare outcomes, but the main thing that we measure for children with in-home maintenance cases is whether or not they enter out-of-home care. And we found that very few children enter out-of-home care. Only 6% of the children with maintenance cases enter out-of-home care within 3 years of joining BFH. So most of the families are staying together after they join the program. And this shows the discharge reason for children with out-of-home reunification cases. A little more than half of the children have reunified so far. Some do exit to adoption or guardianship after reunification services are terminated. And 14% of them were still in care when we pulled this data. So we cannot yet observe their final discharge reason, and we continue to evaluate the child welfare outcomes. I also wanted to note that reentries are rare for families in BFH. Only 6% of children who reunified have reentered care within 1 year of reunification. This graph shows length of stay by exit quartile. So the first 25% of children reunified within 439 days, which is about 15 months. And then you can see exits slow down a little bit, especially for those non-reunification exit types that include adoption, which is typical. Adoptions usually take longer than reunifications. But it took 517 days for the median or half of the children who entered care to reunify. But this length of stay is longer than what we typically see for other children placed in San Francisco. As Amy mentioned, unstable housing can be a barrier to reunification. So that unstable housing, that lack of housing could be delaying reunification. Okay, some well-being outcomes. So we have adult needs and strengths assessments for caregivers that are conducted at baseline, and then follow-up assessments are done every 6 months that families are in the program. So here we're showing some of the significant improvements while families are in the program. Not surprisingly, the largest improvement is in residential stability. That's a very large improvement because the families are getting housing assistance. We also see family functioning or those family relationships improving, which Randall mentioned they really focus on in their case management. Okay, so the reasons that families leave BFH, so 170 of those 195 families had exited as of the end of September. The families typically stay in the program for about a year and a half. And the most common reason for leaving BFH, about 2/3 of the families achieved housing stability. And achieving housing stability means that they've been stably housed for at least 6 months and that they don't have any actionable service needs. Some families also exited because they became disengaged in the program or reunification services were terminated. But in most cases, families achieve housing stability when they leave BFH. All right, so for those families that successfully complete the program, we also conduct a follow-up survey about 6 months after they exit to see if they're remaining stably housed and connected to services. So this has a lot of detail, but in general, the families are somewhat or very satisfied with the quality of their schools, the quality of their housing, their access to childcare. Most of the families were very happy with the affordability of their housing. And the families were very happy with their access to community resources, which suggests that they're staying connected to services after they leave BFH. So in general, families are satisfied with their housing and the communities that they are housed in. However, some of the families still reported difficulty paying for bills. 2/3 of the families reported difficulty paying for at least one of the types of bills that we asked about, most commonly utility bills. About half of them were having some difficulty paying utility bills after they left the program. Okay, we also have some quotes from parents from both the survey and the interview to share more about the caregiver experience with the program. So these are from the follow-up survey. One family said, BFH has truly helped our family find and keep stable housing. Creating this safe and stable home has helped us focus on other aspects of our lives that need support, such as our recovery services, mental health, and creating a positive, loving, and enriching environment for our daughter. So they really recognize that BFH helped them not only with housing, but with their other service needs as well. And one other parent said, BFH has been a true gift to our family. I just wish there was in-person or over-the-phone follow-up after our case was closed. So this family also expressed a lot of appreciation for the program, as did all of the families that gave open-ended responses in the survey, but they would have liked to have access to their case manager after they exited BFH. So we also conducted interviews with 9 families. One parent was talking about her family team meeting, which is between HPP and HSA. She said, I was losing hope in getting my baby back. I thought it was over. And when I saw everyone sitting there, it was over Zoom. But when I looked at everybody's face on the screen, I was like, I have a chance. I can do it. I felt like I had some sort of power again. It felt nice. And another parent shared that their case manager helps me with more than just housing, daycare, childcare, looking into some training for work, anything. She tells me anything I need, I could ask her for, really. So yeah, a lot of the interviews and survey responses had very positive feedback about all of the supportive and housing services that families received. Okay, and now I will turn it back over to Amy for some concluding remarks.
Thanks, Emily. So you've heard a lot about our evaluation, and the findings from that evaluation suggest that supportive housing may help stabilize families experiencing homelessness and lead to successful child welfare case closures. As I noted earlier, child welfare agencies have a strong interest in preventing children from entering out-of-home care when placement can be avoided and reunifying families when children can safely be returned home. Fewer children in foster care, whether due to placement prevention or reunification, translates into cost savings for child welfare systems. More importantly, preventing placement and facilitating reunification through supportive housing are also good for children and their families. And now we'll open it up for questions.
All right, so we have a couple of questions in the chat or in the Q&A button. Thank you for submitting your questions, everybody. The first one is one that Vlada would like to answer, and it comes from Sarah. She says, can you explain the difference between referral waitlist and lottery approach for enrolling?
Thank you, Isabel. So with the referral waitlist, we would accept referrals from protective services workers on an ongoing basis and refer them clients to HPP based on the availability of the vouchers. And if the vouchers were not available at the moment of the referral from protective services workers, we would place those families on the wait list. And once vouchers would be available, we would refer them to HPP. With the lottery approach, we do not have a wait list. We open the lottery once or twice a year, and we give an allocated time for protective services workers to submit a referral form. And then, so we would accept everybody who gets referred. And then Chapin Hall helps us with the randomized approach to get the top number of families that we decided based on the funding and based on the HPP staffing on how many families we're able to house within this lottery approach. And that's how it works. So there's no wait list with the lottery approach. Thank you for the question.
Our next question is from Elisa. She asks, do you work with local domestic violence advocates when your clients are experiencing violence? When you work with survivors, do you provide additional safety measures or coordinate with other services?
I think I can answer that. So yes, sometimes when we receive a referral, family may have already engaged in DV classes, may already be connected to a DV organization. But my case managers also, we provide DV support here at HPP. And we also will conduct a safety plan with the family. A lot of times we are utilizing VAWA for our families. And so anytime we have a situation, we want to take the best protocol. A lot of times we've had situations where there's a safety concern. And so we also have to be strategic about where a family is residing. Also, sometimes we may have to move a family based on a DV situation. And so our biggest focus is always going to be the safety of the family and also the safety of the children. Thank you for your question.
And I also wanted to add that Family and Children Services has a contract with a DV provider, which is La Casa de las Madres. So many of our clients who are assessed and where there is an indication for domestic violence, the clients are referred for the services to La Casa, both victims and offenders. La Casa works only with victims and they subcontract with another provider to work with offenders. Thank you.
Hillary has a question about landlord programs. She asks, do you have any formal landlord programs like risk mitigation programs or liaisons specific for landlords or the capacity side of the equation?
Yeah, so our housing specialists are pretty much the liaison. They also will build partnerships. So within their role is to also not only support families, but a lot of times create those relationships with the landlords and partnerships. And so we are the liaison, the third party, and we are pretty much the point person for any issues that may arise. It also alleviates some of the stress on the landlord as well, knowing that they have a person that they can reach out to with any issues. We also support the families with any maintenance requests and things of that nature. And so we really make sure that we are involved with the landlords because we also appreciate the fact that they are willing to support our families. As we know, homelessness does come with a stigma. And so really want to acknowledge these landlords and property management that have been willing to support us in our program. That answers your question.
Great. Thank you, Randall. Our next question is from Yasmin. She asks, how is the program supporting families to build income needed to sustain housing?
Ooh, good question. So we support our families with connecting them with workforce development. A lot of my case managers will also support with resume building, job searching. We're also in the process of MOU with JVS, which is the vocational training organization out here. And so we really have just been connecting with a lot of workforce development programs, and Goodwill being one. And so we can connect our families with different opportunities. Case managers will also look into apprenticeships. We've had a couple of families enter into apprenticeships, which have led to, larger income employment. But we really are hands-on when it comes to the workforce development because we know it's a key component to getting families to transition off of subsidy. So increasing the income is going to be major, along with, I think to what I mentioned about the difference between PSH and rapid rehousing. PSH also allows the family to think about increasing the income from a different perspective of also increasing the education. And so going back to school, enrolling into school, so we can get our family some of those six-figure jobs.
That's great. Thank you for that perspective. Our next question, thank you everybody for the questions you're putting in. This is awesome to hear from you. The next question is from Jessica. She asks, do your families have access to peer or family peer advocates as part of the service model?
Oh, good question. So within San Francisco, families are able to connect with that additional peer support. We don't have it directly connected with our program, but it's a great question. And also, it's definitely something for us to think about as far as how we continue to, evolve and how we continue to incorporate new things within our program.
Thank you. And I think this may also still be a question for you, Randall, but anyone else feel free to jump in if you have perspective. I think a lot of these are more in your wheelhouse, though. This is more of just a practical question from Nina. She asks, what is the average caseload for your BFH case managers?
Yes. So average caseload, this is a good question because when we were PSH, which was our original model before we transitioned into rapid rehousing, case managers can hold a caseload up to a minimum of at least 15 and a max of 20 for our BFH families. And I know some people may think, oh, how is that sustainable? And so as families get closer to exiting and are stable, and really feel as though they have accomplished a lot of their goals. We do allow families to make the determination on whether they feel comfortable with transition from weekly case management to either biweekly or monthly case management, as we start to really see families get into the realm of graduation. And so on average, that's what our case managers are looking at. The thing I love most about HPP is that they really focus on quality over quantity. And so that's major for us as a nonprofit. Sometimes you really don't see that in San Francisco. And so also with case managers being able to hold 15 to 20 families, it really allows us to take a deeper dive and really provide the intensive case management that is needed and a tailored case management. You know, everybody's case management is going to look different based on the family's needs and approach.
Great, thank you, Randall. We have no more questions in the Q&A. You're on mute, Amy.
Oh, I just asked if anyone has any last minute questions they're dying to ask.
We have one that just popped up in the chat from Nikki. I may have missed it. Is the RRH caseload size different?
Yes. So the rapid rehousing caseload is actually smaller because with us transitioning to rapid rehousing, it means that families are expected to pay 30 to 40% of their income towards rent, and HPP, we pay the rest. And if families come in with no income or limited income, a lot of times we are paying the full rent for families. So within that budget, it allowed us to take, we had to take less families versus with voucher base. Majority of that payment is coming from the housing authority. And so it allows us to take on more families. And so in comparison, to give you a number, the 15 to 20 is what we were looking at with PSH. And so, you know, on average for families, for case managers holding BFH cases, they're looking at about maybe 7 BFH families, max.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As we said, we will be sending out the slides from today's presentation shortly. And if you have any questions, either about the program or about the evaluation, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.